The Goblin Child. Once upon a time, there was a goblin child who was very friendly. He would always wave and say hello to everyone he met. He was always happy and loved to make others smile. One day the goblin child was out walking and he saw a group of human children playing. He went over to say hello and the children ran away screaming. He was so sad that he went home and cried. The next day he went back to the same spot and the children were there again. He went over to them and they ran away screaming again. This time he didn't go home. He just sat down and cried. The goblin child continued to go back to the same spot every day, hoping the human children would play with him. But the children always ran away. He was so sad and lonely that he decided to end his life. He couldn't take it anymore. He went to the edge of a cliff on the outskirts of town. He was about to jump off when a kind fairy appeared. She asked him why he was so sad. He told her about the children and how they always ran away from him. The fairy said, "Oh dear, that is because they are afraid of goblins, but I will help you. I will give you a magic wand that will turn you into a human." The goblin child was so happy. He thanked the fairy and went on his way. He was so excited to have the magic wand that he immediately turned himself into a human. He went back to the same spot where the children were playing and they didn't run away. They were happy to have a new friend to play with. But the goblin child was so strong that he always won the games they played. This upset the other children and made them not want to play with him anymore. He was so sad that he went back to the cliff and was about to jump off when the kind fairy appeared again. The fairy asked him what was wrong this time, and he told her that the children were afraid of him because he was so strong. The fairy said, "Oh dear, that is because you are not using your magic wand correctly. You have to turn yourself completely human if you want the other children to accept you." The goblin child again used the magic wand, this time turning himself completely human. He could feel the strength drain away from his body. It was remarkable to him that human children could survive while being so weak, but if he was able to play with the other children, he thought it would be worth it. He returned to the spot where the human children always played, but it had gotten late and they had all gone home. He dropped his shoulders in disappointment and began to walk home, but he hadn't gotten very far when he saw one human boy outside playing with a stick and a rock. He didn't recognize the boy. It wasn't one of the children that normally played here. The goblin child walked up to the boy and asked if he could play with the stick and the rock also. The boy agreed, and for a while they had a marvelous time together. They would take turns throwing the rock and the other child hitting it with the stick. They were having so much fun that neither of them noticed the sun going down and darkness sweeping over the land. By the time they'd finally noticed, it was too dark to see the road. It was a moonless night and they were too far from town to see the torches that burned on the wall at night. The human boy was scared, not knowing the way home. They tried to feel their way to the road, but only ended up farther away and more lost than before. The boy started to cry. He was scared. The goblin child wasn't scared, but he knew they weren't safe out in the wilderness. Even though he was afraid of scaring the boy even more, the goblin child decided to use the wand to change himself back into a goblin. As a goblin, he could see much better in the dark and could lead them back to the road and to the town. He waved the wand and said the words the fairy had taught him, and he became the goblin child once again. The human boy screamed in terror and began to run, but the goblin child called after him, telling him it was all right and he was the same child that had been playing with him all evening. He told the boy that he would lead him to the road and back home. The goblin child's voice still sounded the same, so the boy decided to trust him and go along. He didn't feel he really had any choice. Using his night vision, the goblin child led the boy back to the road. The two began to walk back towards the town when a wolf came out of the wilderness and leaped towards the human boy. The boy screamed, but the goblin child jumped in between the wolf and the boy and beat the wolf with the stick they had been playing with. The wolf howled at the goblin child's strength and ran back into the wilderness. The boy cheered over the goblin child's victory. This made the goblin child feel very happy and proud. They made it safely back to town and back to their homes. The human boy promised to play with the goblin child again the next day. The next day, he went back to the same spot where the human children played, but his new friend was nowhere to be found. He looked around for him, but he couldn't find him anywhere. He tried to ask some of the other children if they had seen him, but they all screamed and ran away because he had not used the wand to make himself human this time. He was sad that he couldn't find his friend, so he decided to go to the boy's home and see if he was ill. Perhaps he could be of some assistance to the parents and go to get the boy some medicine or food. He went to the boy's house and knocked on the door. The boy's mother answered, and she was shocked to see a goblin child on her doorstep. She immediately slammed the door shut and locked it. The mother called out through the window to the town guards, telling them to take the goblin child away. The goblin child was so sad and scared that he ran away as fast as he could. He didn't know what would happen to him if the guards caught him. He ran and ran until he came to the edge of the cliff. He was so tired and scared that he decided to end his life yet again. He couldn't take it anymore. He didn't believe he would ever be able to have any friends. He was about to jump off the cliff when the kind fairy appeared. The fairy asked him what was wrong this time, and the goblin child told her the whole story. The fairy said, "Oh dear, this is terrible. The wand I gave you doesn't seem to be helping you at all. Well then, there's only one thing left to do." The fairy then pushed the goblin child off the edge of the cliff. He fell to his death on the rocks below. The moral of the story is that you should not look to other people for your own self-worth, and you should never trust fairies.